Are you still on the fence about buying the iPhone 14 Pro Max? Well, after using it for 8 months, we've got some hard truths that might just help you make up your mind. Let's cut to the chase. We're all here to talk about the iPhone 14 Pro Max, the flagship phone that everyone seems to be talking about. It's been 8 months since we got our hands on it, and we have to admit, it's been a wild ride. From the clever dynamic island to the powerful cameras, this phone has everything you could ever want. Or does it? Today, we're going to give you the honest truth about our experience with the iPhone 14 Pro Max. We'll talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, and hopefully by the end of this video, you'll have a better idea of whether this phone is worth your hard-earned cash. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So, we're back with our hard-hitting review of the iPhone 14 Pro Max. Let's talk about its design first. After using it for 8 months, we have to say this phone is definitely a head-turner. The first thing we noticed was the pill-shaped cutout that replaced the dreaded notch. And let's be real, who doesn't love a good pill-shaped anything? Plus, it's nice to see Apple stepping up its game and finding a way to make that area useful with the dynamic island feature. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the camera bump. It's big, really big. But honestly, we don't mind it too much. In fact, we kind of like the way it looks. And let's not forget about the cameras themselves. They're larger too, which means even better photos and videos. One thing to note is that this phone is slightly heavier and thicker than its predecessor. But hey, we're not going to complain about a little extra heft if it means we get all the bells and whistles that come with the iPhone 14 Pro Max. Speaking of bells and whistles, let's talk about the always-on display. We know that Android phones have had this feature for a while now, but Apple's implementation is top-notch. The ability to customize the display with lock screen widgets and notifications is a game-changer. And we love that the refresh rate can scale all the way down to 1 Hz to save battery life. Overall, we have to say that the design of the iPhone 14 Pro Max gets a big thumbs up from us. Sure, it's a little heavier and thicker than its predecessor, but the pill-shaped cutout and dynamic island more than make up for it. Let's not forget about the cameras and always-on display. They're both winners in our book. And speaking of cameras, let's talk about the iPhone 14 Pro Max's cameras, which have definitely caught our attention. 8 months later, and we're still blown away by the quality of the photos and the flexibility of the camera system. As we mentioned earlier, the 48-megapixel wide sensor is a game-changer, allowing you to capture incredibly detailed photos that you can zoom in on without losing quality. It's perfect for when you want to crop a photo to focus on a specific subject or element. The 2x zoom option is also a nice addition, although it falls short compared to the Galaxy S22 Ultra's 10x zoom. The 12-megapixel ultra-wide camera is also worth mentioning, as it's nearly twice the size of its predecessor and offers excellent color accuracy and detail. And let's not forget about the true-depth camera, which now has autofocus and a faster f1.9 aperture for better low-light performance. In fact, the iPhone 14 Pro Max's low-light capabilities are some of the best we've seen on a smartphone, thanks to the photonic engine powered by the A16 Bionic chip. Enabling Pro RAW mode can be a bit of a hassle, as you need to do it through the Settings app, but it's worth it for the flexibility it offers in post-processing. And while the camera app could benefit from a more straightforward way to enable Pro RAW and adjust its settings, once you have it set up, you can easily switch between Pro RAW and regular photos. Now, let's talk about the performance of the phone. As we mentioned before, the A16 Bionic chip is Apple's fastest yet, and 8 months later, we're happy to report that it still holds up. Whether we were quickly switching between apps or indulging in some mobile gaming, the iPhone 14 Pro Max was lightning fast. Playing Asphalt 9 Legends was an absolute treat, and the Himalayas track was a sight to behold. It felt like we were really there, minus the whole risking our lives part. And the benchmark scores speak for themselves. The iPhone 14 Pro Max got a single-core score of 1,882 and a multi-core score of 5,333 on Geekbench 5. That's way better than the iPhone 13 Pro Max and even leaves the Galaxy Z Fold 4 and S22 Ultra in the dust. It's like the iPhone 14 Pro Max is the Usain Bolt of smartphones, leaving its competitors gasping for air in its wake. But seriously, we were thoroughly impressed with how the iPhone 14 Pro Max performed. We're glad to see that 8 months later, it's still going strong. Whether you're a power user or just someone who wants a phone that won't lag when you're trying to scroll through Instagram, the iPhone 14 Pro Max is definitely worth considering. Firstly, we're happy to report that the iPhone 14 Pro Max's battery life is still pretty impressive. It's been 8 months, and we're still averaging around 13 hours and 39 minutes on our battery test. That's pretty good going, considering we've been using it all day for work calls, streaming music, and scrolling through social media. We haven't noticed any significant drop in battery performance either, which is great news for anyone who relies on their phone to last them through a busy day. However, the charging situation is still a bit of a letdown. Apple is sticking with its 20-watt charging, which is pretty slow compared to some of the other phones on the market. We've tried charging it from empty, and it still only gets to around 42% in 30 minutes. It's not terrible, but we've definitely seen faster charging speeds from other flagship devices. The Galaxy S23 Ultra and OnePlus 11 Pro are still way ahead of the iPhone 14 Pro Max in terms of charging speed, but we're hopeful that Apple will upgrade the charging speeds in the next iteration of iPhones. Overall, we're still impressed with the iPhone 14 Pro Max's battery life, but we do wish the charging was a bit faster. If you're someone who needs to charge your phone on the go, you might want to invest in a portable charger just in case. But for most people, the battery life should be more than sufficient to last you through the day. By the way, before we move on, there's something we need to discuss. It's been 8 months since our review, and we've noticed a few possible issues that some users have reported with the iPhone 14 Pro Max. Yeah, you heard that right. One issue that some iPhone 14 Pro owners have reported is a camera shaking or rattling when using certain apps. While we haven't experienced this issue ourselves, we've seen videos of it online, and we're hoping that a software update will address it soon. As for some of the other things we mentioned in our initial review, we still think that the iPhone 14 Pro Max is a powerhouse of a phone that's a joy to use. However, the heft of the phone can be a downside for some users, especially if you're used to a smaller or lighter phone. And while the lack of faster charging may be disappointing for some, it's still not a deal breaker. One thing we've noticed since our initial review is that the eSIM functionality may not be ideal for international travelers who like to switch out SIM cards when they land. Some carriers still don't support eSIM functionality, which can be frustrating if you're used to the convenience of a physical SIM card. Overall, though, we still think that the iPhone 14 Pro Max is the best phone you can buy right now. It's pro-level powerful with an amazing camera and battery life, and it's a joy to use. If you're in the market for a new phone, you can't go wrong with the iPhone 14 Pro Max. Thanks for watching our review of the iPhone 14 Pro Max. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out our channel for more tech reviews and news. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to stay up to date on our latest content. We appreciate your support and feedback, so leave a comment below and let us know what you think.